Say, what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. Yeah, that's me rapping on that intro. And if you want to get that song, it's available only on a 10-song EP that you can only get directly from me on a digital download link. I also have two other mixtapes that you can cop, one with 16 songs, one with 13 songs. They're $20 a piece or 45 for all three. If you're interested, tap in with me on my email, 16tolifemusic at gmail.com. You can cash out PayPal or Zelle me $20 and I get it to you ASAP, man. Now let's hop right into this story, man. So today, man, well, not necessarily a story, it's more of a just I guess I'm gonna be talking about something, right? So today, I'm going my grandson's birthday was a couple of days ago, so I'm taking him somewhere today. So I just come up with something quick, right? To put some content up. And I got to thinking, I was having a conversation with my homie the other day, right? And the topic's probably gonna be, man, are you a Crip or a Blood your entire life? Like, I mean, how long does an individual continue to claim Crip or to claim Blood, even once he gets older, right? And the honest answer is it just depends on the individual, right? I ran across, a lot of dudes, man, Crips and Bloods, when I was in prison, dudes who had extremely well-known reputations, right? And I'm gonna just stick this, mainly to the lifers on this one, or the dudes who had a whole lot of time, right? And to be honest, what I've seen, because every I think it's like in the summertime, they have, like, you have these different organizations, right, who used to advocate for convicts and prisoners to get out of prison, and they have what are called lifers meetings, basically, or lifer picnics, excuse me, where dudes who had life in prison, and of course, when many of us went, I went in '96, especially if you came before then, but even after then, there was really no pretty much hope of ever getting out. Of course, some individuals gave hope. Some individuals had hope. So let me go with the term expectations, right? Due to the way the board was set up systematically, it was extremely, extremely hard to gain your freedom if you were sentenced to life. Even if the judge gave you life with the possibility of parole, they were systematically denying individuals, and it made it extremely hard to get out, right? And so there was no expectation of getting parole if you came to jail as a lifer, right? But at these lifer picnics, right, I see a lot of individuals, man, a lot of dudes who, at one point in time were really well known for their street activities, gang banging, and also prison activities, stabbing, fighting, all that type of stuff, right? And so, of course, when I inquire a lot of these individuals at these lifer picnics, like myself, they're older, right? And one thing I noticed, man, for the most part, all these dudes, their mentalities have changed, right? They're not gang banging, they're not promoting their hood. And it's crazy how a number of these individuals are actually working with organizations or doing things in their neighborhoods or communities to deter gangs, and they're speaking out against gangs, right? Because I just think, of course, when we grew up in gangs, the gangs that we joined was in our neighborhood. People who have not gang bang or whatever, who haven't, I guess, like, participated in that type of lifestyle, they see it as just gangs, you know what I'm saying? But for us, the gangs just were friends in our neighborhood. And later on, as we got older, we just got into different activities, but we were pretty much still doing them with the same individuals we had been knowing all our lives, right? And so my point of saying that is, these dudes now, they feel that, I think they look at the destruction that they feel that they've caused and participated in, and now that they're older and wiser, they're trying to give something back. They're trying to deter, youngsters from um participating, right? I I was locked up with an individual who I interviewed on this show. Very, very well respected dude, very, very intelligent dude, right? And at some point in time, after having a life sentence, maybe, I don't know, maybe 16, 17 years, he changed his life and um, he converted to Islam, right? I believe he was in jail for two separate murders, right? He had a lot of time, and fortunately for him, he came home. The dude was very intelligent, always, and I've known him from the street, always been very educated, very intelligent, right? And studied books all the time, right? And so he got out, he continued to he's out now, he's doing counselor work, very intelligent individual, right? But so maybe about 2 or 3 years after he had paroled, a war jumped off in his neighborhood between his neighborhood and another gang. There were several shootings, several murders on each side. This was going back and forth, right? And so the individuals who had lost their lives on his side happened to be, of course, sons, cousins, nephews of individuals he grew up with, right? And so one day I seen him make a post basically telling his young homeboys if they needed him to tap in with him, right? And when he made the post was basically like he says he made a post on Facebook and he said basically, due to my faith and who I am and who I aspire to be, I have been struggling with myself to even comment on this topic. Of course, a lot of individuals want me, and he was a very well respected shooter from his hood, right? And let me just be honest with you guys, right? While I'm just saying that, a lot of times, even like myself, man, a lot of times when we get caught up on these shootings, man, we've been out there shooting for the longest, right? And that's why it gets so good to us. You when you're young, you're foolish. You think you can continue to get away with things. And I'll be 100% honest with y'all, man. When they sentenced me to 16 plus life, I felt like I had got over. You know what I'm saying? I had done so much shit out there in the street, so much shooting, so much this and that, that I was like I said, I've always told you guys, I've been able to accept my time in prison because I knew what I was out there doing. But I honestly, I felt that I had won because I'm seeing dudes, man, you know, who weren't charged with what I was charged with get the death penalty. I got a homie who I went to school with and been knowing all my whole life. He's still or excuse me, I said death penalty, but my friend, they was trying to give him the death penalty or whatever, but he ended up getting life without parole, like a year or two younger than me. He still has life without parole to this day. Charged with one, he was only charged with one murder. But I did sit in there and see many individuals get the death penalty. My next door neighbor, two doors away, got the death penalty. I still talk to him to this day, right? And so when I seen, dudes who seemingly was in charge with what I was charged with, getting much more time than I got. That's why I felt a sense of relief, right? Because I knew what I had been doing. Now I digress back to this story. So this individual was basically struggling, you know, with getting involved or whatever. But he's basically because of his faith, because of all the time he done, when you do 26, 27 years and you have only been out of prison 2 or 3 years, in our minds, that's still fresh out. You know what I'm saying? We still fresh out after doing all that time. So I don't remember exactly how long he had been out, but it wasn't long, right? And so he's basically saying, man, telling his young homies if they need his advice, holler at him, because regardless of the fact that he has tried to change his life, it still touches him emotionally to see 15 and 16-year-old youngsters from his community, the nephews and sons of individuals he grew up with and was in the street with, out there losing their life, and from the post, I never talked to him personally about the post, but from the post, I got a feeling that he had the sense of they was basically out there gang banging wrong. And if you are, and this is just my interpretation of his post, if you are dead set on doing this, man, let me at least give you a better way to move out there in them streets. And like I said, I never talked to him about the post, but I was a little bit surprised to see him put the post up because because of his intellectual change in prison, right? This dude is very, very intelligent. While he was in prison, he took some college courses, got several different degrees, and once he came home, he capitalized on them degrees, and now he's working. Um, and he's working in that field. And I think the last time I talked to him, he was going back to get his bachelor or his PhD, something like that, right? And I just really admired the individual to be able to come out here and be caught up in the daily hustle and bustle of life and still find time to go to college outside of working and doing everything that he was doing. So to me, it was a very admirable situation. But I say all that to say, the gangs and stuff that we were involved in many times because we had a deep emotional attachment to it because this is where we grew up at, right? And so now these Crips and these Bloods who are older, they are still connected to their hood, and they don't want to send individuals from their hood through the same misery and grief they went through, put their families through, so on and so forth. Right now, you do have some dudes, and honestly, it seems like the majority of the dudes who get out and still, partake in that and still rep their neighborhoods in their older age are not lifers, even if they done the amount of time a lifer would do. Like, so say you go to jail with 40 years and you have, 40, you get half time. So you do 20 years. That's a long time too. But at least when you're coming home, it's a determinate sentence, right? So only thing you really have to do to make it home is survive. You don't have to take any self-help groups. You don't have to do no self analytical thinking, self inventory and figure out who you was and where you went wrong at. And so that's the same for individuals who have a small amount of time, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And so I think the problem with that is you pretty much get out with the same type of characteristics and the same type of character defects that took you to prison if you haven't made any preparations and any plans to change, right? And so that's why a lot of times you see certain individuals fall back into the same pattern, right? Because they haven't did anything to really change who they were in terms of coming to prison, right? So, how long does a person, remain to be a Crip or a Blood, right? And so, like I said, it all comes down to that individual, man. It all comes down to how long that person feels what he's doing is relevant, right? In my talks with a lot of Crips and Bloods who grew up in an era that I want to call traditional gang banging, when Crips wore blue and the Bloods were red, a lot of these dudes feel like they're dinosaurs. They have pretty much phased out because of the things that the younger Crips and Bloods are participating. Nowadays, you'll see Crips and Bloods hanging out together. You may see it may be a Crip hood and a Blood hood who beef with the same Crip hood. So now they make alliances and stuff, right? And so now they hanging together at the table. Before I paroled, man, I seen Crips and Bloods hanging at the table, cousin and blood each other, laughing and talking. And in my day, that was, a Blood hated the word cuz, and a Crip hated to hear the word blood. And just saying that word could really kick off a riot, right? Just you say two Bloods coming in the chow hall talking to each other, not even talking to the Crips. Hey, what's up, Blood? What's up, Blood? Yelling over yelling through the childhood. Then you hear a Crip hear it, and hey, cuz, what's up with all that bull stuff, cuz? Hey, man. So it was called busting somebody's ear, and just because of that simplistic wordplay, now it's a fight jumping off, a riot ready to kick off. So when I came to prison, we it was a rule, not we. The rule was already there that you didn't holler cuz or blood in neutral areas. Like, if the weight pile was shared by Crips and Bloods, you didn't do that. All through the dining hall where you could bust somebody's ear, you didn't do that. Now, of course, the Crips had certain areas they hung out with, and the Bloods had certain areas they hung out with. Now, all that was fair game in them areas. If you happen to be walking by and hear somebody say blood, then that's they was doing what the Bloods do. But so uh but now, like I said, a lot of the Crips and the Bloods who I talk to, they just feel that everything that's going on now is foreign to them, right? So it all depends on the individual. You get some dudes who are older or whatever, they get right right back out there in the thick of things, you know. So it just all depends, man. I told a story about a dude. Matter of fact, they used to call him OG. This dude got gray, all big old giant gray beard. He's still running around, cousin, you know, bumping Tupac, you know, talking about he ain't turning down fades. This dude is damn near 60. Ain't no telling how old the dude was, right? But the dude was definitely old. He talking about he ain't turning down no fades, and you know, and all this old type of stuff. And sure enough, the dude wasn't turning down no fades. He happened to get into it with Marcelli, a dude from Oakland, and got the brakes beat up off him. You know what I'm saying? So it just all depends on the mentality of an individual, man. But in this discussion me and my homie had, we was talking about how, you know, it's a trip because we try to make prison seem so glamorous, right? And I told him, but one thing I've never seen, right? I've never seen somebody get called for release and they say, hold up, come back in a couple of weeks. I'm hanging out with the homies. And, you know, when a dude gets a life sentence or get a lot of time, one of the first things he does is file an appeal. He tries to get out. You know, if prison is so glamorous and it's the place to be, why is everybody filing appeals? Even when they released all them dudes from Pelican Bay, you know, some of those dudes may have had life without parole, may have had sentences that they were never coming home. But the reason they filed those lawsuits is because at the end of the day, they still wanted a better way of living. They wanted better quality of life. Maybe, who knows? I don't know. Maybe they wasn't able to come home, but they still wanted to be able to get out, go to the yard, be able to get sodas, be able to do, you know, just the certain things that make prison a little more comfortable, right? So, at the end of the day, how long an individual will be a Crip or a Blood really comes down to that individual and his mindset. You know, some people feel it's still relevant to get out and represent their gang, and some people, you know, do a lot of time and they realize, hey, you know, I threw away a great portion of my life representing something now that I realized to be false. So it's just all up to the individual, man. Anyway, look, y'all already know what time it is. It's your boy 16 of life. Resume normal program.